Hey guys, it's me, Seren, back with another video. So this is going to be a follow-up video to my last one on The Rock. I wanted to do this video giving a little bit of background info on The Rock, and it's funny because I originally had included a lot of background information on The Rock in my last video, my car video, but I ended up editing it out because I felt like it was extraneous information that was sort of irrelevant to the point. But looking at some of you guys' comments, I kind of feel like, okay, this actually is not extraneous information, and it seems like this is also some background information that people don't know. So I wanted to just make this video addressing some of these things and giving you guys some background information on The Rock. So let's just go ahead and start. So number one, I see a lot of people saying that The Rock has never claimed his blackness. So I just want to say from jump that that's actually not true. So The Rock was born and raised on the East Coast. His father was the original Rocky Johnson. He was a black wrestler. He actually broke down a lot of barriers as a black wrestler in the WWE, and I believe it's now called the WWF, or it's the reverse. It was WWF, now it's WWE, one of the two. His father is a black Canadian. He is from Nova Scotia, but The Rock's father's family immigrated to Canada after escaping from a plantation in the American South prior to the Revolutionary War. They traveled the Underground Railroad, and that is how they ended up in Canada. So something actually really kind of interesting about Black Canadians and also Liberians, because Liberia is also a country that was founded by escaped slaves and freed slaves in order to be sort of a safe haven specifically for the descendants of American chattel slavery. Black Canadians and Liberians exist in this really sort of interesting space of being, they're not American black, right? But they do have the heritage of descendants of American chattel slavery. So Black Canadians and Liberians exist in a really sort of interesting space. And if you guys want to talk about that more in the comments section, I totally encourage you to have some conversations about that. I've been having a lot of conversations with Liberians about this because a lot of Liberians have reached out to me personally, wanting to kind of talk about how they feel about a lot of these types of things. A lot of them feel Liberians. I can't speak. I haven't spoken to many Canadians about this, but a lot of Liberians that I've talked to feel like they have sort of one foot on the continent and one foot here because a lot of, in terms of their heritage, their ethnicity, a lot of the things that have been passed down in terms of foods that they eat and stuff like that are from their ethnic background as descendants of American chattel slavery, and yet they are continental Africans in terms of nationality and where they were born and raised. So it's a really interesting thing with Black Canadians and Liberians, really specifically. So The Rock's father, Rocky Johnson, is a black Nova Scotian who descends from a family of escaped slaves off an American plantation who immigrated to Canada. His mother is Hawaiian. She is Simone. The Rock was born and raised on the East Coast, and then he went to the University of Miami for football. He ended up sort of washing out of football. If you guys have not seen the ESPN 30 for 30 on the University of Miami, I highly recommend that you watch it. It's a great watch. I personally love all of the ESPN 30 for 30s. As we've talked about previously, I love like sports movies and shows. It's like kind of my thing, even though I don't really watch actual real sports, but I love like the background and the backstories and all the things that's kind of going on. And The Rock is mentioned a lot in the one on the University of Miami. So he went to college in the University of Miami. He played football there. They loved him there. I used to live in Miami. People in Miami still to this day love The Rock. He ended up washing out, and that was how he got into wrestling, because he also had wrestling in his family on both sides, because on his maternal side, which is his Hawaiian Samoan side, his maternal grandfather was also like a well-known wrestler. So that was sort of his backup plan, his fallback when football didn't work out. So he ended up getting into wrestling. He joined, so I think it was the WWE, and now it's the WWF. Whatever. So he joined the WWE, and he was originally intended to be sort of a baby-faced good guy, but people hated him. Fans hated him because he was black. So they ended up putting him in the Nation of Domination, which was like which was the black group. It was the super pro-black, black power, fist up like group, and they made him into a villain. He was a villain in the group, and that was where we really got to our like, can you smell what The Rock is cooking? It doesn't matter. Sorry. I said in the video, I like The Rock. Like, I like his movies and I like his wrestling career. Like, I fuck with The Rock. Like, and he, if you've never heard that song, dun, 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 it doesn't matter. Look it up. So that was how he got into the Nation of Domination, and then he kind of became a villainous character, and then he became like one of the best, most well-known sort of wrestlers of all time. And then he transitioned into mainstream and doing his mainstream acting and stuff like that. And as I said in yesterday's video, obviously at some point somebody realized that playing up his racial ambiguity and also playing up his Samoan and his Hawaiian side would make for a better career. It would make for more money. It would make him more palatable. It would most likely make him less threatening, you know, and just like I said in yesterday's video, I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was The Rock personally. I don't know if it was somebody on his team, but it's his career. It's his brand. It's his name, you know, so we're going with The Rock at some point started being obviously marketed as more racially ambiguous in order to make him more palatable and more mainstream. But for the vast majority of his wrestling career, his football career, you know, up until that point, he was depicted as black, he was portrayed as black, he was seen as black, he was very vocal about his black background, about his father, you know. So I think that people are maybe not, people see The Rock now, and we've talked about this previously, people seeing like the now and not really knowing about what came before and not really doing a lot of their homework and knowing their history of a person. So obviously we see The Rock now, and now The Rock is clearly like, his Samoan and Hawaiian side is way more played up than his black side. His racial ambiguity is way more, you know, palatable, so it's marketed way harder than just saying that he is a black person. I also want to say a lot of people have been saying that he does not care about black issues. The Rock very quietly, he doesn't fucking blast it from the rooftops, but The Rock very quietly gives a lot of money to the University of Miami. He also donates a lot of money to black youth football programs in Miami and through Florida. They actually have a really great show right now on Stars, Warriors of Liberty City, which is about how sort of this black youth football culture in Miami and especially in Liberty City, which has given at least 3 or 4 NFL stars. So The Rock, and that's also why I like Gridiron Gang, which was, as I said in the other video, about this man that started this football team for these kids, mostly black kids that were in a juvenile detention center, because The Rock does a lot of that type of stuff in real life, like giving money to black communities and low-income communities and poorer communities, especially in Miami and especially in Florida, and doing a lot of work and especially working with kids through football and stuff like that with black youth. He does. Now, people have said he said all lives matter. I never saw that. I never read that. I don't know about that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that The Rock does not care about black causes and doesn't do things for black people, because, like, I used to live in Miami. I know for a fact that that is not true. So I wanted to throw that stuff out there about his background, about the way that he grew up, about his career prior to him really being mainstreamed as this more racially ambiguous person, and also about a lot of what he does do in terms of philanthropic causes for black people specifically. Like I said, it's funny because I mentioned all this in my original video, but I cut it out because I felt like it was all extraneous, because regardless of everything that I just said, I still do not think that The Rock is right for this role. I still don't think that he's right for this role, but like, let's just make sure that we keep our facts straight when we're talking about him and his career and his background and some of the things that he's done. So I want to read you guys some stuff, some comments and some stuff. I originally mentioned it in this video and I ended up editing it out, but The Rock's father's family is descended from escaped slaves who fled to Nova Scotia from a plantation in the American South. I left a comment to someone else that many Black Canadians and also Liberians exist in a very interesting space of not being American Blacks, but being DACS in terms of heritage. Also, The Rock did go to the University of Miami and very quietly gives a lot of money to their program and other philanthropic endeavors for Black youth in Florida, where he lives. He still lives in Florida. His main residence is in Florida. It is not in LA. It's in Florida. And I say LA because he does movies, obviously. Regardless of that, I just don't think he's right for this role, right? Which is why I said I cut it out, because I felt like it was extraneous, because like all that shit aside, I still don't think he's right for this role. I just don't think he's right for this role, which in my opinion should be a dark-skinned, non-racially ambiguous Black male due to the nature of the story. Specifically, it's about the story. It's not about The Rock, because people are trying to make it about The Rock. I don't think it's about The Rock. It's not about Dwayne Johnson. It's about the story. Case in point, when Zoe was cast as Nina Simone, which I did a video on, I had an issue because Nina's American Blackness is her story. So it's not about Zoe, right? People are worried about the wrong things. People trying to make it about, well, we hate Zoe and this and that. I mean, now Zoe is the All Lives Matter type, but it's not about Zoe. It's about Nina. It's about her story. It's not about The Rock. It's about John Henry. It's about the story of John Henry. At some point, this stuff has to matter. I said, case in point, I'm going to read that again. Like I said, my beef isn't with The Rock personally. It's not about him. It's not about what he's done or what he hasn't done or anything. It's not about him. I just don't think he's right for this role, which in my opinion should be a dark-skinned, non-racially ambiguous Black male due to the nature of the story. Case in point, when Zoe was cast as Nina, I had an issue because Nina's American Blackness is her story. At some point, this stuff has to matter. I really do believe that. Also, a lot of people have been saying, well, if not The Rock, then who? I'm going to read a comment. Could he have gone with another actor? Maybe, but the question is who. Michael Clark Duncan would have been perfect had he not passed. So who does that leave? The all-state guy? He just has the voice. I don't see Terry Crews, so maybe Michael Jai White or Eric LeRae Harvey, Mahershala Ali, Ving Rhames, and some have even mentioned Shannon Sharp. Now I replied, I said, why does it have to be a known actor? Why not a fresh face? I'm sure there are tall, strong, up-and-coming Black actors. When we start talking about roles, there's always this question of, well, if not him, then who? There are so many working Black actors. Maybe if we gave some fresh faces a chance instead of naming the same 5 names, we would also improve representation. And for the record, I personally think Leonard Roberts would be perfect for this role. Now, Leonard Roberts is Sean Baldhead ass from Drumline. Let me show y'all a picture. Y'all see it? You see it? Hating ass Sean. Hating ass motherfucking Sean. You can't tell me that Sean would not be perfect. Leonard Roberts, you can't tell me he wouldn't be perfect for this role. Somebody also suggested Ray Fisher, who played Cyborg in Justice League, and you guys know that I love Ray Fisher with all of my heart and soul. If you watch my Justice League review, y'all know that I'm a stan, and he is from Baltimore, Maryland, and I think he could be really great for it also. And guess what? He also has stage experience. For all these people talking about Black American actors that don't have no stage experience, blah, blah, blah. And that's Ray Fisher. Y'all see him? And your man is cut the fuck up. He played Cyborg. Like, I mean, he would have to be bald, but they could shave his head. Some people have also brought up that they don't mind The Rock so much, but what they really mind is that it's almost like, and this is also like what lends towards the inclusion of The Rock, what I was sort of even getting at yesterday, which is that The Rock is this like big, sort of mainstream, recognizable, you know, face, not just in action, but also sort of in like the family-oriented action films, Jumanji and the Tooth Fairy movie and stuff like that. So somebody was like that they also have an issue with The Rock because they feel like, again, like this contributes to the sort of mainstream Disneyfication almost, even though we did have a Disney cartoon made of this story. But again, just as a way to just make it like this palatable, it's for everyone, it belongs to everyone. And they also said, which I read an article that talked about this as well, they were like, I have an issue with the way that it seems like the movie is going to be presented almost as like a fantasy with other white folklore, you know, characters being brought in, which I did read that as well. All of the links from yesterday's video I'm going to include again, so please make sure you check out these links. John Henry is, like you say, either an escaped or freed slave, and I have never seen him depicted as anything other than dark-skinned with unambiguously black facial features. I don't have much against The Rock, but I honestly don't know how I feel about it. A legend like this needs to be done tastefully and seriously, but now all I can think about is a movie on Rampage's level, something more spectacle than classic hero story or moral. And I replied, I said, there's a link in the description box to an article discussing how they're eventually planning on making this a multiverse action movie series, sort of like how the show, a multiverse action movie series featuring all different types of folklore figures, sort of like how the show Once Upon a Time does fairy tales. I was like, I don't know about this, Chief. We're gonna have a CGI Abraham Lincoln fighting The Rock as John Henry while Harriet Tubman is the referee. And it seems like that's the direction that they're going in. And I also feel like if that's the direction that they're going to go in, like, of course they would pick The Rock. Like, now we can see why they would pick somebody like The Rock for that type of movie, right? But is that appropriate? A lot of people were also bringing up who is going to be cast as John Henry's wife. John Henry's wife is also really important to the story, and she has historically also been depicted as a darker-skinned, unambiguously black woman. And a lot of people have also said that they're concerned because in the majority of The Rock's movies, he is usually paired with a non-black woman. So if Dwayne casts Anika Noni Rose or Tiana Paris or another dark-skinned actress to be John Henry's wife, I might let him slide. No, in Hollywood, they will make John Henry a sexless, unmarried Negro, a Green Mile character with no connection to any blackness, which I thought was a really, really interesting thing to say. My grandfather worked this is from Lisa. Shout out to Lisa. You always leave great comments, Lisa. My grandfather worked the steel mills in Pittsburgh, so I grew up knowing the John Henry folklore very early and always saw him as a darker-skinned person up against the horrors of capitalism using tech to render people obsolete. That is exactly the backbone of the story. I also like Dwayne a lot, but feel there are too many up-and-coming black actors who would be a better fit. To me, Dwayne is at the same level of a large actor in terms of snagging all the roles to the point of being ubiquitous. I see a trailer now, it's like Dwayne again, Kevin Hart again. I've always known Dwayne as a black Samoan, and although Hollywood plays up his racial and ethnic ambiguity, Dwayne, from what I've seen, has always embraced all of his backgrounds. Even back when he was wrestling, he talked about his dad. I would see pictures of his dad, and he bragged about the legacy his father had in wrestling, etc. Right. His father's legacy being like one of the first black wrestlers to like break a lot of like barriers in wrestling. Personally, I feel Dwayne wanting to do this role and produce it is his way of connecting to that black history that he is a part of, and I applaud him for that as a producer. He has said that John Henry was one of his heroes growing up, and it has been confirmed that he is one of the producers. And somebody else also said, I don't have an issue with him producing it, especially if this is like one of his childhood heroes that he wants to bring to the screen. That's great, but like, why does he also have to star in it? Which made me think of Atlanta, which we've talked about. I've said repeatedly that I like Atlanta, but I feel like Donald Glover is the weakest link. Why do you have to write, produce, direct, and star in the shit? Like, it's okay for you to be in charge of the production and maybe hire other unknown actors or up-and-coming actors, give other people a chance to shine, right? Personally, I feel Dwayne wanting to do this role and produce it is his way of connecting to that black history that he is a part of, and I applaud him for that as a producer. He said John Henry was one of his heroes growing up. However, I don't think he represents what we have known John Henry to be, a dark-skinned black man. It's the same issue with Zoe Saldana playing Nina Simone. Again, like I said, this is not about The Rock. It's about John Henry. What is appropriate for the depiction of John Henry? And even though John Henry is a fictional character, he does represent a collectively idealized darker black person among black folks. It's like the backlash that Disney got for making Tiana light-skinned with a loose curl pattern for the new animated cartoon when she was clearly designed after Anika Noni Rose, dark-skinned with full features. The red flags for me were not just Dwayne's casting, but how the pitch was presented in the article written about it. Jake Kasdan is directing, the director of Jumanji, and his pitch sounded like he's bringing in a lot of white American folklore characters to surround John Henry. Again, this idea that it's going to be like the Avengers with white American folklore heroes, Johnny Appleseed and I don't know about white people. Johnny Appleseed is the only person coming to mind. And John Henry, and they're gonna be fight, you know, and it's just like, I don't know. We don't know. And his pitch sounded like he's bringing in a lot of white American folklore characters just around John Henry. So my concern is that John Henry will be decentered to make way for characters that white people will want to see. Hollywood always wants to appeal to white audiences because they think that's where the money is, and it's not anymore. Having a big name is also no longer a guarantee for success. I'd rather see an unknown or an up-and-comer in this role personally. All of John Henry's depictions have been darker skinned. Now, if Black American folks in all shades were getting roles hand over foot with full equity, then we wouldn't have to worry about this. But being this is America, and America is always on some bullshit, this does become an issue in terms of representation and what Hollywood picks for comfort. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa, you stay with a great-ass motherfucking comment. So again, I just want to reiterate that The Rock has claimed his blackness. Previously, it was a huge part of his career coming out. Like I said, up until a certain point where he went more mainstream and definitely began playing up the racial ambiguity factor more. I don't begrudge him that John Henry is one of his childhood heroes that he wants to bring to the screen. And again, I don't have no personal issue with like The Rock personally. It's not about him, but it is about the story. So I'm gonna read that my comment, which is a pinned comment on my last video, one more time. Like, I originally mentioned it in this video and ended up editing it out, but The Rock's family is descended from escaped slaves who fled to Nova Scotia from a plantation in the American South. I left a comment to someone else that many Black Canadians exist in a very interesting space of not being American Blacks, but being DACS in terms of heritage. Also, The Rock did go to the University of Miami and very quietly gives a lot of money to their programs and other philanthropic endeavors for Black youth in Florida where he lives, right? So like, he does have some DACS heritage. He has been vocal about his blackness. He does do things for the Black community. It's not about any of that. None of that is why I don't think he's right for this role personally, right? Also, The Rock did go to the University of Miami and very quietly gives a lot of money to their program and other philanthropic endeavors for Black youth in Florida where he lives. Like I said, my beef isn't with The Rock personally. I just don't think he's right for this role, which in my opinion should be a dark-skinned, non-racially ambiguous Black male due to the nature of the story, period. Case in point, when Zoe was cast as Nina, I had an issue because Nina's American Blackness is her story. At some point, this stuff has to matter. And also just from the whole pitch and presentation of this movie and this production, it's coming from even this weird space of like Avengers for folklore, for white folklore with John Henry at the helm. So it doesn't really seem accidental to have The Rock, who is very much racially ambiguous, portraying this character who has always been portrayed as a dark-skinned, non-racially ambiguous escaped or freed slave. And this is folklore that means something to people. Like how Lisa said, she grew up in Pittsburgh with family that worked in steel mills. It's not just something, again, the way that I felt when they cast Zoe Saldana as Nina Simone, because I love Nina Simone in a very personal way. This is not just something that we could just, the way that people felt about Harriet Tubman, you know, this is not just something that you could just slap any type of person in these kind of roles and keep it pushing, right? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, there's nuance, right? Because, for example, another name that I've seen people suggesting is Winston Duke, right? Who was M'Baku in Black Panther. I would not want Winston Duke playing John Henry. He's not American. Like if my choices came down to The Rock and Winston Duke, I'm going with The Rock. Like, I'm sorry. Like that's a hard choice, but I'm going with The Rock because The Rock does in fact have DACS heritage. The Rock was in fact born and raised in the United States. He did go to the University of Miami. He does do a lot of things for the Black American community. So like, let's say if it came down to somebody like Winston Duke, who is, you know, dark-skinned and fucking huge, but is not American and doesn't do shit for us, versus The Rock, who grew up with John Henry as a childhood hero, I am gonna go with The Rock in that instance, right? Because I think that The Rock's qualifications, I guess you could say, in that instance are better. But if it's between an up-and-coming, fresh-faced DACS, darker skin, unknown male, actor, or a Ray Fisher or a Sean bitch ass from Drumline versus The Rock, I'm going with Ray Fisher or Sean versus The Rock, right? People, I guess we're really just like entering into the space of like deciding like, how do we feel again about ethnicity and heritage and culture? Like, I would be so against Winston Duke in this role. I can see The Rock in this role more than a Winston Duke, but I could see Sean from Drumline, Leonard, or Ray Fisher in this role more than The Rock, or again, some up and coming type of actor. Like, we have to decide like what is important based on the story, based on, again, even talking about this race matter and voice acting. I'm just not with this like throwing anybody in a part with no type of consideration, especially these type of stories and folklore and stuff like that, and historical figures and real people too, like that really makes people feel that they feel like strongly about. It just all comes across as wanting to use a more racially ambiguous figure in order to sort of, again, mainstream this Black American story of this Black American hero that would have been dark-skinned and big and intimidating. And it just really comes across, as a way of like using this more racially ambiguous figure in order to mainstream this story, in order to make it more palatable, in order to make it so it belongs to everyone, especially if we're going to go in the direction of creating this, Disney multiverse of white American folk heroes being helmed by a racially ambiguous John Henry. The premise sounds weird of making it into some type of like action multiverse, whoop-de-woo, whatever. So wanted to do this follow-up video because I thought that this was kind of like more simple, but apparently not. So follow-up video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Food for thought as always. See you guys next time. Peace.